Welcome back to Real Shit, where we like to talk real shit all day, every day, all for the love of movies. I am Joe, and today I'm going to be talking about why I think Man of Steel is a great Superman movie. Before I get into it, please like, comment, share, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications. Any little bit of feedback or support would be greatly appreciated. Without further ado, I'm going to get right into it because I have a lot to cover here. So, Zack Snyder is one of those filmmakers that I feel like is criticized and ridiculed unjustifiably. Sometimes he makes bold decisions in his movies, and sometimes he does things that maybe people don't understand. But all in all, he is a very capable filmmaker, and I think he, in my personal opinion, he's made 3 of the best comic-related movies of all time, possibly 4 once the Snyder Cut of the Justice League comes out. But for me, I just don't understand why he gets criticized the way he does. I think it has a lot to do, quite honestly, with just how the audiences are in modern cinemas are basically absorbing their entertainment. The other stuff that we're getting thrown at us, I think, has kind of shaped people into wanting only wanting things done in a certain way, and aren't capable of seeing things in a different capacity. And I think that's a huge reason why Zack Snyder gets ridiculed as much as he does. So, in my personal opinion, a majority of modern superhero movies, while flashy and entertaining at times, don't offer a lot of depth and don't offer a lot for me to want to go back and have a second viewing. Usually I watch them and I move on, and then it's whatever, and I typically don't watch them again. And this goes for some Marvel and DC movies. This isn't a Marvel versus DC debate. I think a lot of modern superhero movies just leave a lot to be desired. And when I watch something like Man of Steel, it shows me what we could have in the genre if filmmakers were allowed to make more bold choices and were allowed to express themselves and basically take a character that we all know and put a fresh spin on it. And I think that's what we get with Man of Steel. Like, after I watch Man of Steel, I feel inspired. I feel like I want to know more. I feel like I want to go out and write a movie. Like, that's how I feel after watching Man of Steel, and I think that's something that's missing from the genre in other movies that are made in this genre. So the Nolans and Snyder basically set out to make a Superman who is relatable, to give him flaws, to have to tell a version of his story that basically we haven't seen before, something that's unique, something that's going to provoke thought in people, and I think they did a good job of that. They took aspects of the Superman mythology that everyone's familiar with, and they attempted to add rational and realistic explanations to them, which is not easy to do because it's a pretty fantastical idea. The idea of someone coming from another planet and becoming a superhero. He's basically an alien. But they tried to ground it as much as they could, and I think they actually did a good job of that. It's a bold strategy, but it's definitely something, in my personal opinion, when you're bold, that's when you're going to be remembered. And when you try to go cookie cutter with it, at least for me, when I see a movie that's very cookie cutter, very assembly line, very formulaic, again, it doesn't inspire me to return to it. And if anything, Man of Steel is not formulaic in the least bit. So people often criticize Superman for being too powerful, too unrelatable. And Zack Snyder shows Superman in different stages of his life through the course of this movie, from a baby to a full-grown adult. And he shows them through all stages of his life basically struggling with being different. And that's something that a lot of people, again, can relate to. Showing the viewer the real personal issues someone from another planet would face when they're trying to integrate themselves into society. To me, the overlying theme of Man of Steel is sacrifice. Something, again, everyone can relate to. His father tells him early on that people are afraid of what they don't understand. So sacrifice may be necessary to protect your dangerous secret. And that's something that Clark carries with him through his whole life. Jonathan Kent also teaches him that even if they don't understand what the reason is, he is here for a reason, and he should spend his whole life trying to discover what that reason is. Again, something else that shapes the way Clark thinks and sets him off on this journey. Now, while he's on this journey, he encounters a lot of humans, and he unfortunately sees the ugly side of human beings. And there's even moments in the movie where he clearly shows resentment towards human beings. And I think that was another bold decision, because for Superman to not automatically see the good in everyone. He sees how ugly people can be to him and to each other. And there's a moment in the movie where he talks to a preacher. He talks about how he doesn't trust God, but he doesn't trust humans either. And I think that's very telling and a very different spin on the Superman character that we hadn't seen up until this point. And a very, quite frankly, natural reaction to people mistreating you your whole life. So Jor-El tells him that he can be the symbol of hope humans need so they don't end up like Kryptonians. He can help them accomplish things. Of course, he can only do that if they trust him, if they don't view him as a threat. So Superman has always been regarded as being more human than most human beings. He's this all-powerful being. He could do whatever he wants. It's a snap of a finger. He could destroy us all if he wanted to, similar to what Batman says in BVS. But he was raised by hardworking, honest farmers, and they basically inputted their values, their human decency on him, and molded him into a good person, a human being. Even though he has powers, he is a human being. And I think that is, again, something they elaborate further on in Man of Steel that we don't always get in all Superman movies. The Jonathan Kent death scene is something that people have criticized quite a bit in this movie. It's definitely controversial. At first, to be quite honest, even I had issues with it because I was like, why would he just let his father die like that? It doesn't seem like something Superman would do. But if you watch it in the context with everything else that's going on, now watching it now, it makes perfect sense. Again, this movie to me is about sacrifice. So Clark learns that he can't save everyone in this moment. It's a similar lesson that he gets when Jonathan just dies of a heart attack or whatever in the more traditional Superman stories. But in this particular case, he has to make a choice. And that choice basically comes down to he can't save his father in this moment. Out of respect for his father, out of the respect for his father's ideals and the fact that his father just wants to protect him and doesn't want his secret to get out, Clark makes a choice and has to watch his father die in order to preserve his secret identity. And I think that is, while it may be difficult for some people to understand, it's an agonizing thing to think about. And I think anyone put in that position would probably have to do the same thing, to be quite honest. And I know a lot of people aren't going to agree with that. A lot of people think he should have just rushed in there and rushed back and maybe not have saw him. And maybe nobody would have saw him. But the fact of the matter is that there's always a chance that someone could see him. And so he had to make that sacrifice. He had to make a choice. And it was a difficult choice. But it's the only way that, in their eyes, that he is going to be able to fulfill his destiny later on. So I think that's another deep idea that they tried to do here with the death of Jonathan Kent. Superman has to show restraint through the course of this movie, and it's definitely relevant when he's a child and he's being bullied, and he could easily take the bullies apart, but because of what his dad tells him and how his mom talks to him and just the fact that he wants to be the better person, he makes choices about the hero that he wants to be. He doesn't let things that are going on around him necessarily shape who he is. He might resent those people, but it doesn't change who he is as a person. And I think that was just a very cool idea as well. He surrenders to the military in this movie. He doesn't have to, but he does it to gain their trust. And again, it's him showing restraint. But he knows from early on, because his dad told him, like, the military, or not just the military, humans fear what they don't understand. So it's his, basically, mission to make them feel comfortable around him. Now, he lets them know he could easily break out of this, and that was his way of adding comfort, because he's like, I could easily just take you all out right now, but I'm not going to because I'm on your side. So he says to him, he says, you can't control me, but that doesn't make us enemies either. He's letting them know, like, we can be on the same side, but you're not going to do whatever you want with me. So now we come to the other part of the film that people seem to have a lot of issues with, and that's the finale. And again, this whole finale, again, lends itself to the idea, again, of sacrifice, which is what I think this movie is ultimately about. So while Superman does do a lot of damage to the city when he's battling Zod, I did notice this time around that a majority of the damage is already done with the world machine. So to say that he caused all these deaths is a little bit stretching of the truth, I guess. He does cause some damage, and he probably does cause more deaths when he's battling Zod, but a majority of the deaths, a majority of the destruction happens when the world engine is set off by Zod. So I think it's a little bit jumping to conclusions to just assume that he killed all these people. And again, he could have led Zod away after the world engine was destroyed. But again, I think it has a lot to do with him just not being a full-blown hero yet, or still in the learning process. Like, he's not thinking about how his actions may have consequences for the people on the ground. And they also do a good job of showing those people on the ground in this movie to drive that fact home more. Like, you see the employees from the Daily Planet struggling to avoid all the destruction and trying to help each other get out of the rubble. And so you see it on a ground level, what his actions or the actions of his battle is having on the regular people on the ground. So I think that's just an idea of how they wanted to build the character and build the world, and essentially create that paranoia in the human characters of someone like Superman being all powerful. So, and then we come to the part where he actually kills Zod, which is something, again, people have a lot of issues with. And I think it's just another example of him making a sacrifice. Moments before this happens, he listens to Zod's little speech when they're on the ground together, and you could tell Superman actually feels for Zod a little bit. He sees things from his perspective. Maybe not, obviously Superman's not as radical as Zod is, but he understands that Zod only wanted what was best for Krypton and its people. So when he has to kill him, and he screams out, and you could see the agony in his face, I mean, that's just him making a sacrifice. He had to sacrifice the only other Kryptonian who's left in order to save a handful of humans. Now, why save a handful of humans? I think it's just a symbolic way of saying, okay, Krypton had its time, now it's time for humans to take the reins, and humans have a lot of work to do, but they still have time to change things and set things right, and this was like a symbolic way of saying that, like, Krypton is done, and humans, it's your turn now. And I think it was just a really cool way of saying that. And yes, it's not typical of Superman to kill people, but in that moment, I guess he didn't have much of a choice, because Zod was not going to stop. Zod was fanatical at that point, and he just did what he had to do. He had to make that sacrifice. As far as getting away from Superman as a character, the other stuff I like in this movie are Hans Zimmer's score. I think his score is just as iconic as a John Williams score. I know that might be controversial as well, but every time I hear that piano in this story, I just get goosebumps. Specifically when Clark's running around in the yard as a kid and he's got the cape on and he does the little pose. Like, it just adds to the beauty of all of Zack Snyder's beautiful shots. All the action and fight sequences are great. It's everything you could ever want from a Superman movie from a action perspective. And it's not something that we really got in a Superman movie up until this point. Just balls to the wall fighting and destroying buildings. Like, it's something I always wanted to see, and we get to see it in this movie. The prologue on Krypton, I think, is about as visually stunning as can be, and it's probably could have been its own movie, to be quite honest. It's just captivating. You could tell they put a lot of effort into crafting that world. Zod as a villain, I have to admit, when I initially heard that he was going to be the villain of Man of Steel, I was a little bit disappointed, because like, I just felt like Zod's been done to death. But the way they wrote the character in this story, and with Michael Shannon's performance, I think his unhinged version of Zod, and being the fanatical military extremist that he is, I think was the right way to go, and it added... Again, it gave us a different version of Zod that we didn't necessarily see. And it's no disrespect to Terrence Stamp, but he was a more reserved version of Zod. And in this case, he's just, again, ruthless. And what's funny is that he's ruthless, but they also managed to make him sympathetic in certain aspects too, which is not easy to do, but they did a good job of that in this story as well. Lois Lane being an investigative reporter and figuring out Superman's identity pretty early on, I think that is a no-brainer, to be quite honest. I mean, she can't be that good of an investigative reporter if she can't figure that out, right? So having her figure it out early on in the movie, I think, was, again, a realistic approach to that, I guess, relationship between Lois and Clark. So I definitely dug that, and I think Amy Adams is a great Lois Lane as well. The Fortress of Solitude being a buried Kryptonian ship rather than just a cave that sprouts out of a crystal or out of the snow, or however they choose to do it in whatever form we've seen the Fortress of Solitude in. It just makes more sense. It's a simple solution to the Fortress of Solitude. It's just a ship that's buried in the Arctic. Like, that's what it comes down to. And I think that was a cool choice. The Codex being imprinted on Cal's cells basically makes him the literal last son of Krypton. Like, it's taking the moniker the last son of Krypton and making it literal. Like, he is all that is left of them. The information, him, like everything about Krypton is in him. And I thought that was really cool too. His explanation for why he became a reporter, basically saying he wants to keep his ear to the ground and no one will think twice when he's running into dangerous situations. Again, the fact that he's a reporter is just always taken for granted. He's a reporter, but they actually give a reason why he's a reporter in this. And I think the biggest thing that they kind of stated here was that in this movie is that Kal-El was basically always special. And essentially they say that by telling the viewers that he was the first legitimate birth on Krypton prior to it exploding. So he was the last person to be born on the planet legitimately, and the first person to be born legitimately in thousands of years. Like, everything was predetermined for everyone. It was a society that basically had your life planned out for you before you were even born. And Jor-El and his family decided to have a legitimate child and not put those restraints on him, and it made him special from the very get-go. Like, from a baby, he was meant to be something more. And I think that was just a really cool idea too, and something that they never really addressed either in other Superman stories. But overall, as you could tell, I think Man of Steel is a phenomenal Superman movie. Not just Superman movie, I think it's a phenomenal superhero movie. I think it's underrated. I think people should give it another chance if you haven't seen it in a while. It's definitely worth a watch, and I think you need to go into it with a little bit more of an open mind. Don't always just assume that Zack Snyder is out to destroy your heroes or anything like that. Like, I think he respects the character, I really do, and I just think he wanted to put his own stamp on the character, and I think he does that in a very effective way. And yeah, it's definitely highly recommended by me. It's one of the major reasons I'm so excited for the Snyder Cut of Justice League, and I'll also be covering Batman vs. Superman at some point as well, I'm sure, because that's another controversial movie that everyone seems to hate on. But I think if people can just are willing to expand their horizons a little bit and not be so close-minded about things, I think if you give Man of Steel a real chance to affect you or to make an impact on you and not close yourself off from it, I think it's definitely a movie that's worth watching, and it will do that for you. So yeah, overall, I enjoyed it. Let me know what you think about Man of Steel in the comments down below. Do you love it? Do you hate it? I'd be interested to know, and I'd be interested to have a discussion with you if possible. As always, please like, comment, share, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications, and we'll see you next time right here on Real Shift. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. Peace out.